Hi and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video we are going to learn about the past tense. This video is split into 4 parts. In the first one we are going to learn how to form the past tense, so that means we are getting to know 7 rules. Then we are also going to take a look at some exceptions, followed by our third chapter where we are going to learn when to use the past tense. Later on we also have some exercises plus solutions. So let's start right away. How to form the past tense. Rule number 1. If the verb stem of a verb is ending in the letters O, Ö, U or Y, then we have to add the past tense marker I to it plus the personal ending. Let's take as an example the verb sanoa, which means to say. The first step here is to find the verb stem, which is sano. In the second step, we have to add the past tense marker I to the stem. So that means we have sano plus I is sanoi. Now in the third step we can finally add the personal ending. Let's say we want to form the first person singular, so that means we have to add n to it. So we have sanoi plus n is sanoin. Minä sanoin means I said. Let's take another example. Säilöä, which means to preserve. Step number 1, here we have to find the verb stem, which is säilö. So here we see that our verb stem is ending in the letter Ö. Now in the second step we have to add the past tense marker I to the stem. So that means we have säilö plus I is säilöi. Now in the third step we add the personal ending. Let's say we want to form the second person singular, so that means we have to add T to it. So we have säilöi plus T is sinä säilöit, which means you preserved. Next example is asua. Asua. The first step here is again to find the verb stem, so it is asu. Here we see the verb stem is ending in the letter U. In the second step we add the past tense marker I to the stem, so we have asu plus I is asui. Now in the third step we again add the personal ending. Now we want to form the third person singular. So that means we don't add anything to it. The third person singular doesn't get an ending in the past tense. So that means we remain with asui. So that means our result is hän asui. Hän asui, which means he or she lived. And our last example for this rule is pysyä, which means to remain or to stay. The first step again is to find the verb stem, which is pysy. Here we see the verb stem is ending in the letter Y. In the second step we add the past tense marker I to the stem, which means we have pysy plus I is pysyi. Now in the third step we add the personal ending. Let's say we want to form the first person plural, so that means we have to add me to it. So we have pysyi plus me is pysyimme. Me pysyimme, which means we remained. Now let's move on to rule number 2. If the verb stem of a verb is ending in the letters A, ä, I or I, then we have to remove these letters, plus we have to add the past tense marker I to it, and then the personal ending. Let's take as an example the verb ostaa, which means to buy. In the first step we have to find the verb stem, which is ostaa. So here we see the verb stem is ending in the letter A. Now in the second step we have to remove the A. So that means we remain with ost. In the third step we add the past tense marker I to it. So that means we have ost plus I is osti. And then in our last step we have to add the personal ending. Let's say we want to form the first person singular, so that means we have to add n to it. So we have osti plus n is ostin. Minä ostin means I bought. Let's take another example. Pitää. This word actually has many meanings. Let's just focus on one meaning, which means to hold. In the first step again we have to find the verb stem. So this one is pitää. Then in the second step we have to remove the ä letter and we remain with pid. Then in the third step we have to add the past tense marker I to it. So that means we have pid plus I is pidi. Then in our last step again we add the personal ending. Now let's say we want to form the second person singular. So that means we have to add T to it. So we have Pidi plus T is beaded. Sinä beaded means you held. Next example, lukea, which means to read. In the first step again, we have to find the verb stem, which is lue. In the second step, we have to remove the last letter E and we remain with lu. Then in the third step, we add the past tense marker I to it and we have lu plus I is Louis. And in our final step, we add the personal ending. Now let's say we want to form the second person plural, so that means we have to add te to it. So we have Louis plus te is luitte. Te luitte, which means you read, plural. And our last example for this rule is etsia, which means to look for. Step number 1 is again finding the verb stem, which is etsi. So here we see our verb stem is ending in the letter I. In the second step, we have to remove the I letter and we remain with ets. Then in the third step, we add the past tense marker I to it, which means we have ets plus I is etsi. Step number 4 is adding the personal ending. Now let's say we want to form the third person plural, so that means we have to add vet to it. So we have etsi plus vet is he etsivat, which means they looked for. Now here it's also important to mention that there's an alternative way, which is adding the personal ending directly to the verb stem. Note that this only works when the verb stem is ending in the letter I. Alright, let's move on to our third rule. Verbs consisting of 2 syllables with an A in each. So that means the first syllable has an A and the second one as well. What do we have to do then? We have to remove the second A and then we add oi to it plus the personal ending. So let's take a look at one example. Aja, which means to drive. In the first step, we have to find the verb stem, which is aja. So here we see each of the syllables has an A in it. Then in the second step, we remove the second A. So that means we remain with I. Then in the third step, we add oi to it. So that means we have I plus oi is aioi. Then in our final step, we add the personal ending. Now let's say we want to form the first person singular, then we have to add n to it. So that means we have aioi plus n is aioin. Minä aioin means I drove. Now let's move on to rule number 4. This one is about verbs consisting of 3 syllables with an A in each. So that means first syllable has an A, second syllable has an A, and the third one as well. What do we have to do here? First we have to remove the third A, then we add I to it plus the personal ending. Let's take as an example the verb rakastaa, which means to love. In the first step, we have to find the verb stem, which is rakastaa. In the second step, we have to remove the third A, so that means we remain with rakast. Then in the third step, we add the past tense marker I to it. So that means we have rakast plus I is rakasti. And then in our last step, we add the personal ending. So let's say we want to form the first person singular, so that means we have to add n to it. So we have rakasti plus n is rakastin. Minä rakastin means I loved. Alright, let's move on to rule number 5. This one is about verbs ending either in da or de. So that means we're talking about verbs of verb type 2. Here we have to remove the first vowel, add the past tense marker I to it, and then the personal ending. Let's take as an example the verb tuoda. So in the first step we have to find the verb stem, which is tuo. Then in the second step we have to remove the first vowel, which is u. So that means we remain with to. In our third step we add the past tense marker I. So that means we have to plus I is toi. And then in our last step we add the personal ending. Now let's say we want to form the first person singular, so that means we have to add n to it and we have toi plus n is toin. Minä toin means I brought. Next one, rule number 6. This one is about all the verbs of verb type 4. Here we have to remove the stem's last a or a, then we add si to it plus the personal ending. Let's see how it works with an example. Halota, halota, which means to wish. The first step is again to find the verb stem, which is haloa. In the second step, we remove the stem's last a and we remain with halo. Then in the third step, we add si to it. So that means we have halo plus si is halosi. And then in our final step, we add the personal ending. Also here we want to form the first person singular, so that means we add n to it, and we have halosi plus n is halosin. Minä halusin, which means I wished. Now let's move on to our next rule, which is number 7. This one is about some verbs of verb type 1 where the imperfect marker is C. How do we recognize such verbs? This kind of verbs do end either with erta or erte, enta or ente, elta or elte, and double vowel ta or double vowel te. Here are some examples for each of the endings. Ymmärtää, which means to understand. This one has the ending ertä. Next one is rakentaa, which has the ending enta. Then we have kimeltää, which means to glitter. This one has the ending eltää. And then our last one is tietää. Tietää, which means to know, and this one has the ending double vowel tää. So let's see how it works for each of them when we want to put them into the past tense. Let's begin with ymmärtää, which means to understand. The first step is to find the verb stem, which is ymmärrä. Now in the second step, we have to drop one of the two KPT change affected letters. What does it mean? When we look to the infinitive, which is ymmärtää, the RT changes to a double R. And now we have to drop one of these double R's. So that means we remain with ymmärrä with one R. Now in the next step, we have to replace the last ä by c. So that means we have ymmär plus c is ymmärsi. And now in our last step, we can finally add the personal ending. Let's say we want to have the first person singular, so we have to add n to it, and we have ymmärsi plus n is ymmärsin. Minä ymmärsin, which means I understood. Let's do another example, which is rakentaa. This one means to build. First step is again to find the verb stem, which is rakennaa. Then in the second step, we have to drop one of the two KPT change affected letters. So here we have a change from NT to a double N. So that means we remove one of these two N's and we remain with rakennaa. Then in the third step, we have to replace the last A by C. So that means we have raken plus C is rakensi. And now in our last step, we add the personal ending. To keep it simple, let's take the first person singular again with the N ending. So we have rakensi plus N is rakensin. Minä rakensin, which means I built. Next example is kimmeltää, which means to glitter. First step again is to find the verb stem, which is kimmellä. Then in the second step, we drop one of the two KPT change affected letters. So the LT changed here to a double L. Now we drop one of the two L's and we have kimmellä. Then in the third step, we replace the last ä by C. So that means we have kimmel plus C is kimmelsi. And in our final step, we add the personal ending. Again, we want to keep it simple, so let's take the first person singular. So that means we have kimmelsi plus N is kimmelsin. Minä kimmelsin, which means I glittered. And our last example for this rule is tietää, which means to know, and it is ending in a double vowel tä. So the first step again is finding the verb stem, which is tiedä. In the second step, we drop the KPT change affected letter. Here it is, T changes to D. So we remain with tie. And in our third step, we replace the ä by C. So that means we have tie plus C is tiesi. Now in our last step, we can add the personal ending. Again, let's take the first person singular and we have tiesi plus N is tiesin. Minä tiesin, which means I knew. Let's move on to our next chapter about the exceptions. There are actually 3. Let's go quickly through them. First one is nähdä, which means to see. So I saw is minä näin. You saw is sinä näit. He or she saw is hän näki. We saw is me näimme. You saw plural is te näitte. They saw is he näkivät. Next one is tehtä, which means to do. I did is minä tein. You did is sinä teit. He or she did is hän teki. We did is me teimme. You did plural is te teitte. And they did is he tekivät. And the last exception is käydä, which means to visit. So I visited is minä kävin. You visited is sinä kävit. He or she visited is hän kävi. We visited is me kävimme. You visited plural is te kävitte. And they visited is he kävivät. Alright, let's move on to our third chapter, when to use the past tense. We use the past tense when we have past indicating time expressions. So when we have in a sentence expressions like eilen, which means yesterday, viime viikolla, last week, or viime vuonna, last year, then we have to use the past tense. Here's one example. Viime kesänä vietin 3 viikkoa Lontoossa. Means last summer I spent 3 weeks in London. So viime kesänä means last summer. Vietin is the first person singular past tense of the verb viettää, which means to spend. 3 viikkoa means 3 weeks. Note that viikkoa stands here in the partitive case because it's following a number. And then we have Lontoossa, which means in London, in a SIF case. So let's repeat. Viime kesänä vietin 3 viikkoa Lontoossa. Last summer I spent 3 weeks in London. The next situation where we use the past tense is when we are listing past actions in a row. For example, heräsin aamulla kello 7 ja sitten menin keittiöön keittämään kahvia. Means I woke up in the morning at 7 o'clock and then I went to the kitchen cooking coffee. So, heräsin aamulla, I woke up in the morning. Kello 7 means at 7 o'clock. Ja sitten means and then. Menin keittiöön means I went to the kitchen. Keittämään kahvia means cooking coffee. So here we see we have 2 actions that happened in a row. The first one is I woke up and then I went to the kitchen. Next situation where we use the past tense is when past actions are completed. For example, ajoin Lontoosta Oxfordiin 2 tunnissa. I drove from London to Oxford in 2 hours. Ajoin is here the past tense first person singular of the verb ajaa, which means to drive. Lontoosta means from London. Oxfordiin means to Oxford. 2 tunnissa means in 2 hours. So here we see the action is completed. So let's repeat. Ajoin Lontoosta Oxfordiin 2 tunnissa. I drove from London to Oxford in 2 hours. The next situation is telling about past actions that kept repeating. So that means when we're talking about things that we did every day. For example, kävin kirjastossa joka päivä means I went every day to the library. So here we have an action that kept repeating. I went every day to the library. So every day here indicates that we did something on repeat. And the next situation where we use the past tense is also when we want to provide additional information for building up an atmosphere. For example, oli sumuinen, sateinen ja tuulinen päivä. It was a foggy, rainy and windy day. Oli here is the past tense of the verb olla, which means to be. Sumuinen means foggy. Sateinen means rainy and tuulinen means windy. Now let's move on to our final chapter, exercises plus solutions. So here are 10 verbs in the present tense, and the task is to change them to the past tense. For each answer we have 5 seconds. Let's start. Hän sanoo in past tense is, that's right, hän sanoi. Next one, minä luen in past tense is, that's right, minä luin. Next one, me annamme. That's right, me annoimme. Next one, sinä rakastat. That's right, sinä rakastit. Next one, he vievät. That's right, he veivät. Next one, te haluatte. That's right, te halusitte. Next one, hän tekee. Hän teki. That's right. Next one, he näkevät. That's right again, he näkivät. Next one, minä käyn. That's right, minä kävin. Next one, hän tietää. And that's right again, hän tiesi. Very well done. So that's it for today. I hope you liked this video. If you did so and want to learn more Finnish, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Thank you so much for watching. Have a nice day and see you next time.